Okay, in this next video, talking about organic sculpting, we have, let's say we've modeled in Mudbox or ZBrush, and we've imported the model back into Maya. And let's say our mesh has got really, bad topology, and, because we've been sculpting, and it's time to retopologize. And so again, part of why I love this process that I've been outlining is while you're sculpting, you're not having to worry too much about the topology and that kind of technical aspect. You can devote all your energy into the creative aspects of getting your character into place. So I've got my character here, and one thing that's going to be important is just make sure when you import it that it's going down the center of the scene, right? So if I press 4, we can see the center of our model lines up with the center of the world right here in terms of left and right. And so next up, what we're going to do is we're going to select on this model in object mode, and then you're going to go up to the top bar and click on this little magnet to the right, and it's called Make the Selected Object Live. And so what that does is it makes any object that you create kind of snap to the model here, or under the surface of the model. And so we're going to click on that, and then we're going to go down to quad draw and start turn symmetry on and start creating some geometry. So when we do the quad draw tool, by the way, is going to create a second mesh that is kind of snapped on top of this mesh right here. So you're going to have kind of one mesh with bad topology and then one mesh with good topology. So I'm going to click on the make selection live, and then I'm going to go down to the quad draw tool, click on that, and then next I'm going to go to symmetry in the modeling toolkit, and I'm just going to turn that on X. And so now I can start using the quad draw tool. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a loop around the eye, and this is kind of similar to what I teach for planar modeling as well. I'm going to create a loop around the eye, then we're going to create a lot of geometry down the center, going down the center of the face, and then extract a loop for the mouth. But I like to start with the eye, and I like to start with 4 polygons on the top, 4 on the bottom. We want to keep our geometry nice and low. So to create, to use the quad draw tool, I'm just going to, you just do normal left clicks to create vertices. So I'm just going to create 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'll hold shift, so hold down shift, and you should get a preview while you're holding shift of this box. And so I just click, and I got my first polygon right there. And from here, I can just click on these corners and move them around like that if I want to reposition them right here. And if I click on the edge, you can move the edge. Really simple. And if I want to delete it, I can just click right in the center and press delete, and then it should be gone. I guess I didn't delete on the other side, but we're gonna, we can mirror and all that good stuff down the road. So there's a lot of different functions we can do in quad draw. And so if you scroll down, so under quad draw, I can go under, let's see here, keyboard mouse shortcuts, and click on that arrow to expand that. And from here, you can see all these different functions that we can do to extrude like edge loops, to add subdivisions, anything you can think of is right under here. So that's a really helpful resource. So I'll just leave that open so that you can kind of reference back to that whenever you want. And so while you're drawing, one thing that might come up, so I'm just kind of thinking ahead to issues that you might have here. So I'll just click shift, create my second subdivision. And sometimes you might like click off the model, or maybe click the select tool, so I click on select, and you see how it changed. We kind of went off of the quad draw tool, and I lost my model for a second there. And so if that happens, it's really easy to kind of pick back up where we left off. Is you can see, let me just go to object mode and hide that. So you can see that there's the second mesh that's being created right there. Let me turn back on my main mesh. So if that ever happens, all you have to do is you just click on your reference mesh, and then click again on the magnet tool, and then click back onto quad draw. And oh, I'm sorry, I messed that up. Here we go. So object mode, let me bring the head demo back. Okay, so this is what you do. My apologies. So you click on your reference mesh, and then click the live selection magnet button, and then click on your new poly surface. So you can see it in your outliner. You could also click on it right here in the perspective view. So I just click on that, and then I click quad draw, and we're back in business. So again, I recommend 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom for the eye loop. We want to keep the subdivisions nice and low here. It's really easy to add subdivisions, and it's really hard to take them away, and we're going to kind of stitch a bunch of them together. And so when you keep your geometry nice and simple, it will make this whole process go a lot easier for you. So you can see I have just 4 on the top right there. And again, if I want to delete a face, I could just delete like that. If I create vertices and I want to get rid of those, let's go back down, scroll back down and see our shortcuts. What was it? It was Control, Shift, and click. And so if you hold, I'm on a Mac, so Control, Shift, and click on those vertices. I can get rid of those vertices, for instance. So again, I'm just going to draw that back. So I just clicked to redraw the vertices, and then hold Shift to give myself a preview, and then I click in order to fill that in. So I have, again, 4 on the top. I'm going to create 4 on the bottom. And notice how I'm trying to keep the edges kind of emanating out. And then right here, I can just hold Shift to bring that together. And you can always kind of adjust this after the fact. Once you get comfortable with using the quad draw tool, it is pretty easy to use, to be honest. There's kind of an adjustment period that needs to happen, so you just kind of be patient. But once you get it, it's really not too bad. So keep in mind symmetry is turned off. So this is an area that I've seen trip people up. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of draw some faces kind of down essentially down the center to the chin. And so I'm going to remember keep our topology, our poly count really low. And so the center of our model, let me click over. I'm going to go to a 2 view. So I'm going to click right here. So I can see the front view. If you want to see the front view, you can go Panels, Orthographic, and click Front right there. And let me just turn on X-ray for a second. Okay, so I can see the center of my scene is right there. And I want to keep my geometry nice and low. So I'm just going to click on my model on this part of the nose, kind of outside of the center. And now if I just click in the center right there, it will, as long as you're pretty close to the center, Maya will figure it out for you. And so from there I can just hold Shift and I can fill that in. And again, I'm just going to keep my geometry nice and low. See, I didn't get it quite there. So if 2 vertices show up, then you need to retry it. So I'm going to hold Shift. And you see how a triangle shows up? So I don't want to click there. I want to hover it. Oops. So that it looks like a square. And again, you'll see sometimes I have to press Edit Undo to kind of get that working. And so for me, I just have 3 on the nose. I can always add more subdivisions later, right? So the main goal that you should have during this process, I'm going to have one for the bottom of the nose. The main goal you should have for this process is just get your model filled in. It's really easy to add subdivisions later, and it's really hard to kind of fix complicated models. And so just kind of keep that in mind. So just think we're aiming for Nintendo 64, not X-Gen right now, right? So I'm just going to bring that down, and here we go. And so you can see I'm just drawing something right down the middle. And if you're looking at my subdivision, so I have 4 and 4 right there. And I have 1, 2, 3 for the nose. I have 1 for the bottom, and I have 1 for the top lip, 1 for in between the nose and the lip, right? So I'm keeping this really simple. For the mouth, I'm going to leave a little bit of a space because I want this character's mouth to have an opening. And so I'm going to click on the outside, and you notice I click on the inside to get that center part. And so this is just going to be 1 subdivision for the center of the face. It's really helpful to have your front view open to click on that center point. And let's see if I can get that. There we go. And again, I'm just going to keep this really simple for this part. All right. So I essentially just have one for the lip, one for kind of in between the lip and the chin, and then one for the chin right now. And let's start going up the forehead a little bit. So I'm going to make these really big. So right there. See how big I'm making these faces right here? So this is just continuing my theme of, let's switch our orthographic view to the top. Continuing on my theme of just keep this really as simple as possible, fill in the details later. It's so much easier when you do it this way. If you fill in a bunch of subdivisions early on, this process gets really laborious and unfun. So, you know, just kind of keep that in mind. So for this back view, I'm just going to be real basic here. I'm going to just use my perspective view, make some massive polygons to kind of fill in the rest of the head all the way to the back. Okay, so you can see I have it going all the way to the front. And let's go back to this view. And so from this point, let's add a new trick into our toolkit. And so we can just model the whole thing this way, where we're just kind of 1, 2, 3, adding one subdivision at a time. And that's a great way to do this. Something else we can do is we can extrude edges. So if I hold tab and I click, I can extrude an edge like that. So that can be a really helpful thing. And we can also extrude edge loops. Although if I try to, see if I, yeah, that's right. If I hold tab and then I middle mouse click, I can extrude a whole edge loop, but you see how sloppy that gets? So in order to make that not sloppy, let's go ahead and bridge this face with that right there. So I'll click Shift to do that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold tab and then just normal left click to extrude that out right there. And let's see here, what's the best way to do this? And so we'll kind of get to that in a minute. Sorry, I just need to, extruding an edge loop, I just need to set this up just a little bit more. So I need the side of the nose at this point. So I'm going to click one vertice there, hold Shift, and get that going. Okay, so let's try this again now. So if I hold tab and I middle mouse click, I can drag and see now I'm getting an edge loop that's clean. And the reason is it's not trying to go make an entire circle around the eyes at that point. It's just a little bit of it. And so that kind of makes that edge loop come out much, much cleaner. And so from there we can start to connect to that. But I just mainly wanted to kind of show you that initial technique right there. Let me kind of bring us back to this point. Another trick that we can add to the toolkit is let's think about adding a subdivision. I know I've been talking this whole time about keeping it simple, but I just want to show you this. Is if you hold Control, I can add an edge loop like this, and I can also hold Control and add an edge loop that's like that. So it's just going to follow along with your topology, and so where you let go matters a lot. And so if I let one go right here, where it's going around the eyes, it's not really going to hurt anything for me because it's not adding any new edge loops. It's just adding a little bit more information right there, right? So you know that's definitely not any kind of problem. Before I start to kind of emanate out around the eyes and get too far ahead of myself in that area, why don't we go ahead and start focusing on the mouth? And so it's going to be similar where I have one subdivision on each side. Let's, I'm going to click and then click right there, hold Shift, and I'm just trying to be patient until it kind of gives me the right thing. You might have to zoom in order to kind of get that to show up the way you want it to. So if you click some vertices and it's not doing what you want it to, like what's happening right here, just zoom in on it and it should, that often helps. Right when I say it, there we go. commentator's curse right there. And so I'm just going to have 1, 2, 3 right there. And I'm going to do the same on the bottom. And something we can do is, instead of kind of struggling with the edges, why don't we do this? So I'll show you another trick. Is we can snap these two vertices together, and it's really easy. So I'm just going to click and move this one to the corner of the mouth. And then this one, this vertex, I'm just going to click on it. And then if I just, you see it snaps right there. So my cursor changes to an arrow up, arrow down, and it'll snap right there. Let's do that for the corner of the mouth. So I'm going to take that top one, move it down. And this one, I'm not holding anything extra. I'm not clicking any special buttons, just a normal mouse click, and snap. And if I want to add more subdivisions in here, which I think I do, I can just hold Control. You see I get an edge loop right there. So I get, that kind of goes back to my theme of it being very easy to add more subdivisions. Something I recommend as well on your mouth is, before this vertice was kind of out like that, and typically on a model, I want that to be much closer in. You know, try to space it something like this. There's a lot of deformation that needs to happen around the corner of the mouth. So this is an area where, you know, maybe it gets just a little bit denser right there. Okay, so now we're really starting to, we've got the core fundamentals going at this point. Let me bring this chin all the way down to the bottom of the neck. So that'll be a good next step. So I'm just going to click here, click in the middle, oops, and hold Shift. Edit Undo as our friend here. I'm just going to do one more for the neck. Oops. Yeah, and if you get two vertices, that's not what you want, right? You want it right in the middle. There we go. I'll zoom back out, hold Shift. There we go. All right, so let's get an edge. So now we want this to kind of start emanating out. We want that to start emanating out. Before I do that, I guess I do want to start working on the nose just a little bit. So let's start filling in the nose. So I'm going to click a vertex here to kind of bring up that loop to this point. And I can tell I want, let's add a subdivision in the nose right there. And I'm clicking two vertices at that point. One trick that we want to do is we do want to avoid adding too much geometry in here, but we also want the flow to kind of match, right? So this is very kind of on brand with what I'm trying to do here, which is, you know, with these edge loops going around these facial features. Same thing with the nose. The nose is mainly defined by the front and these nostrils, and so we're trying to kind of create those edge loops first and then kind of build back into it. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways we can connect these. Oops. And let's create one for the bottom of the nose. And I might hold Control here. Oops. So I didn't do anything complicated there. I just kind of brought out these faces right there. I held Control to give myself an edge loop around there so I could kind of build out a nostril. And it doesn't really hurt anything for me to add go ahead and add another couple subdivisions in here just to kind of start to define that inner nostril. But again, take note, you know, I've done this a bunch, so I'm comfortable doing that, but try not to add too much geometry. I'd much rather you keep things really simple. Notice here that on this main nose, I've kept it really, really simple out there. So let's mess around with, oops, wrong button. Let's mess around with bringing this edge loop out from the mouth a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold Control. I'm going to let go right there. And we're going to build out an edge loop emanating out from the mouth. And I guess I'll do one below as well. So actually, hold that thought. I'm sorry. Don't worry about that edge loop right now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hold Tab, middle mouse click. Oh yeah, that doesn't quite work. What I'm going to do, third time's a charm. I'm going to click right here, and hold Shift, and bring out that face a little bit. And now I can do the tab, middle mouse click, drag that out. And remember, we can snap those vertices together like that. And at first I was going to go ahead and add an edge loop, but then I realized I don't need an edge loop right there. I'm just making work for myself at that point. So I'm just making one big old edge loop for the whole mouth region, and then we can hold Control and add subdivisions later if we want. So right here, I'm just going to click and add a vertex there, hold Shift, let go, hold Shift, let go. So now we got that going. And so now if you wanted to, I would wait on this, but you can start really adding in those loops at that point if you really want to. But again, let's try to focus on keeping this model nice and simple in case you like miss any steps, run into any issues, anything like that. So I'm just going to start adding out on this loop a little bit. So I just clicked a vertex there, held Shift. I'm going to do the same process I was doing before where I just add a face there, and then I can hold Shift, connect, click, hold Shift, connect that. You see how much easier this is when you keep your geometry simple? When I start adding geometry into here, this can start getting kind of like needlessly complicated. But so now we are at a stage where we're kind of creating these loops coming around, and I'm going to hold off on this zone just for a minute. But we might start adding some subdivisions just when we need them. So that'll become clear in a minute. Also take note how these edges, so if you follow my cursor, this edge, that edge, these edges are all emanating out from a point right there. Same as the mouth. If I'm doing this right, generally speaking, these edges that I'm pointing to kind of emanate outward, and they should remain relatively consistent. If the spacing's uneven, I'm a little less, you want it to be even, right? But it's, especially in this area, I'm not too worried about it. We can even it out down the road. For the eyes, we do want it to kind of stay even. Anyway, okay, so let's do the same thing we did for the mouth for the eyes. So I'm going to just start emanating that circle out, and I'm just starting really broad because it's really easy for me to kind of get the outside of that loop going. And then I can just hold Control and add those inner loops nice and easy. So I'm just kind of looking for the outer kind of eye socket area. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to click right there, hold Shift, and you can see I want to close in this quad, but this polygon's huge. So what I do is I just hold down Control, click, let go. Now I'll hold Shift, let go right there, and then I just even that out a little bit. Look how nice that's coming out. Okay, so same idea here. So let's hold Shift, click right there. Let me think about this for a second. Let's start out here, and then I'll work back to that spot. So I'm clicking on this vertex, hold Shift, create a vertex by clicking, hold Shift, right? So I'm just doing this nice and simple. And so I could connect this. I'm just trying to think if there's any argument for if I need to, no, that's fine. Okay, so I'll click right there to fill that in, and then I'm going to snap that vertex down so they connect, hold Shift, fill it in. Look at that, we got a face filling in here. For here, if I create a polygon there, that's a little too big. Why don't we hold Control, fill that in there. And so now that polygon is still pretty big, but it's at least a little bit more manageable in terms of scale. And so now we can really start, we have really the core of good topology happening right now. And so now it's just a matter of filling in the rest of the character. So I'm just going to kind of work down at the bottom of the chin area. Maybe I'll hold Control and create a loop that kind of indicates like the bottom where the chin really starts to roll off. But I am really concentrating on trying to keep the topology simple, but at the same time, keeping the topology simple but trying to keep the spacing, relatively even. I'm a little uncomfortable with how large that face is compared to the others. And so maybe what I need to do is hold Control, let go right there, and go ahead and just add another edge loop happening right here. There's always going to be a little bit of some weirdness that happens in your model around this section, but usually there's a little less movement there, so not the end of the world. And I'm not doing anything too complicated, right? So I'm just clicking and then holding Shift to add vertices. Sometimes I hold Control to give myself another edge loop. And so we're just kind of starting to build out. If you feel yourself starting to get a little too detailed or dense in the face, let's just go ahead and start focusing on kind of building out around the top of the head. So you really don't want to get too far ahead of yourself on that stuff. So maybe I just click, hold Shift. Let's just kind of close this thing off so that we're starting in a good spot. Remember, if I want to, I can hold Tab and extrude those out at the same time. And if you do that, you just need to click on this vertex and snap it. Same thing over here. Try to keep these edges moving in a nice line. Just try to keep their direction consistent. And so here's another example where low geometry equals a lot less work, right? So I just held Tab, middle mouse click, drag that out. Then I just, oops. And if that happens, just zoom in a little bit and make sure it snaps. Your cursor should get an up and down arrow when it's about to snap. And just continuing this loop around. And so here I'm just really focusing on low geometry and keeping these loops kind of about where we want them to go. I think I got a little too ahead of my skis there. There we go, that's a little better. Okay, so click, hold Shift. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to build this loop that kind of goes around the side of the head in the temple area. So I can see I need to create one loop right there. So now I'm worrying about this loop. Just trying to keep that circular motion. There we go. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you see how much easier this is with just like low geometry? I'm also kind of just going around the ear. I'm just avoiding the ear for right now. And we can add subdivisions later. Let's just go ahead. Speaking of that, I'll add one subdivision there because it's having trouble closing that loop. There we go. And so now to connect that, I can just let that fly right there. And to connect the rest of the top of the head, that extrude edge is probably going to come in handy. So Tab, I'm going to click on this edge right here, middle mouse click to kind of start to bring that out. I can snap it. And oops, I can tell I need, so that's 2 more subdivisions. So I need to bring this way in right here. And I need to add 1 subdivision for this one. And then I have 2 subdivisions incoming at the top. So I held Control and let go right there. So let's do that again. So from here I can also, I don't have to extrude the edges, right? I can just click on a vertex there. Fill that in, click on a vertex there. Hold Shift, fill that in. I might have to, yeah, I'll need to extrude an edge. It's kind of fighting me a little bit there. So I'm extruding that edge. Oops, let me just redo that. So Tab, extrude, there we go. Snap. Whoa, if something goes crazy, just press that and undo, And I snap that. And finally hold Shift. So now the whole head's starting to kind of get filled in. Okay, let's kind of worry about in front of the ear a little bit. So I'm just going to click, hold Shift, click, click, hold shift, hold shift. My jawline, I didn't nail that. Let's see here. So if you ever want to redo topology, let's see here. Let me think about what I did there. If you ever want to redo topology, you can just click and delete faces, right? So that's, you know, a really nice advantage. And when redoing topology, you can just remember you're just trying to like create a bridge that you can later connect. It doesn't need to be hard, right? So, and I realized I wanted this edge to kind of go and connect up to here. And it was kind of connecting right there or something like that. And so what I did is I just deleted a few faces, gave myself an area that I could kind of rework and rebridge. And so now I can just concentrate on the jawline coming up here, and I'll connect it right there. And I can kind of slide this up a little bit, give myself a little bit more room in these regions. And then from here, I can start adding some subdivisions. So I can hold Control, let go, and hold Control, let go. So that's a lot better right there. So you see how that jaw is kind of coming around like that? That's definitely a big improvement and worth the effort, in my opinion. So next up, so we're kind of at the point where we can just start adding some subdivisions to this. And you might also want to save your work, right? So File, Save Scene As, you know, maybe Retopo version 1, save, you know, just in case something crashes, you know, you don't want to lose all your work. So let's go back down to the bottom and start reconnecting here. I can tell I'm going to connect around the ear. And I can add a subdivision right there if I need some more wiggle room in that neck area. Something else I'm noticing, so on that front of just kind of trying to get topology good, is we have two arteries that kind of come around this way. And my topology is kind of fighting against that a little bit right now. And so again, part of the advantage of just working with low geometry, we're not in a race to kind of fill this in prematurely. And so something you can always do when you run into that is just kind of create the edge loop that you want, right? And then start to kind of bridge together to fit around it. So this is just me being a perfectionist, right? I could have just filled in the model and been totally fine. Let's see here. Oops. You know, so ideally, we kind of have something that kind of goes around more like this. So this just, you know, load topology, kind of build the topology you want, and then try to make it happen, you know. And so from here, I'm just repositioning things. One tool that'll be really helpful for you is if you hold down Shift, and this is particularly helpful once this starts to get denser, is if I hold down Shift, you see that starts to smooth and even out the geometry. This model's still too low poly for that to be very helpful, but you know, that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And so from here, I'm just trying to kind of jigsaw this together. So I'm going to hold Control, get that edge loop going, hold Control, hold Shift, right? So hold Shift, got that, and then I have that. And so that's a lot better than what I had before, because I have that artery kind of coming up, and so that topology is just matching a little bit better. And so from here, you want to save your work. And at this point, remember at any point, if I click off my model, I have, and it's not the end of the world. So I have this new mesh that's right there. And so if you ever click off, just again, I just click on our reference model, click on Make Object Live, click on our quad draw model, and then click quad draw. And so if you want like a low poly version of your model, maybe you click on this and duplicate it or something like that, but I'm just going to keep going. So click on that, quad draw. And so now we can just start adding subdivisions. So just hold Control, and this first pass, I'm mainly worrying about just evening things out a little bit. It's going to be a little bit wonky, and that's okay at first. But again, I'm just kind of concentrating on evening this out and getting that information where it's needed, right? That of denser geometry. So I'm just holding Control this whole time and just filling in my model. And it's a little uneven, you know what I'm doing, but that is where that shift tool can be really helpful down the road. So just I'm holding Control, letting these rip. Okay, that's getting a little dense in this zone right here. So let me just okay, so that's pretty good. And so from here, I can just hold Shift, and you can see while I'm holding Shift, it just evens out that geometry. Do you see that? So holding Shift, and so these areas where maybe it's just getting a little bit dense, I can just hold Shift and just draw along the line that you want to smooth out. Another kind of thing I could have done as well is I could alternatively have kept this mesh really low geometry and then smoothed it from there. And the trick with smoothing, though, is it doesn't necessarily lock on to the reference model. So kind of doing what I'm showing here, and see how I'm drawing along those lines to smooth them out. So I want those lines not to have any wiggle to them. I probably got a little overzealous with my subdivisions when I was doing that, but it was fun, you know. But doing it this way kind of stays the most on brand to my reference model. And so from here, I just, you know, I think you get the idea, right? I'm just drawing along these lines that have some kind of spider web wiggle to them right here. And I'm just drawing along those lines, and it'll get easier and easier as you kind of continue to make progress. Oops. So right here, I can need to draw a horizontal to kind of even out that line a little bit. And it just starts to work itself out a little bit. This quad draw tool really is one of my favorite developments in Maya, because it just allows you to just sculpt freely, and then when it comes time to retopologize, you know, you just put on your thinking hat a little bit for retopology and just kind of stitch it together. And so this, you know, this still needs, you know, a little bit of work, right? I haven't totally nailed it. So, but again, this is getting a little bit redundant because I'm just holding Shift and kind of smoothing out these lines right here. And once you start to kind of get this to a point where you're happy, you can just click off of it. And I have my reference model, and this is the model that we just created. And so it might look a little bit faceted. I can press 3 and smooth it. And what I have now is I have a model, oops, wrong one. What I have now is I have a model that has the exact same shape as what I had created before, but just with topology that, again, is kind of emanating out from the eyes. So we got the nostrils going, we have it emanating out from the mouth. And so if I were to rig this character, I would be able to get full expression from the character. I left the ears off, and so one reason for that is sometimes it can be easier just to kind of model the ears separately and put it back on. If you have a character with simple ears, you know, I usually recommend that because earlobes can be a giant pain. You could just continue to do what we're doing here, where you just create a new loop going around the ear to formulate that. So anyway, this is the overall process, and so this is kind of like the last step for the organic modeling process. Um, One last note that I would add here is, so this is a great way to kind of get your mesh up to its base form. And if you want to add like really detailed sculpting, like wrinkles around the eyes, textures on the lips, stuff like that, we can bring this back into like mud. We can UV it, and then we can bring this back into Mudbox or ZBrush for detail modeling. And so we can kind of sculpt all those really intricate details at that point, and then bring it back onto this model using a technique called using normal maps. So that's another option that's available.